Welcome, EasyMed Nation. Today we have a great podcast. It will be a two-part podcast with Erik Vollebregt. So Erik is a lawyer from Axon Lawyer. And if you are not following him, if you are not following his blog, so I will really recommend it. We'll talk about that during the episode. So Erik will talk to us about the journey for the EU MDR, the EU IVDR. He will be really open with us, be really frank and honest. So it will be really a great podcast for you to listen. It will be two parts. So we have the first part this week and the next part will be next week. So episode 15. And today I want also to ask you if you have subscribed to my podcast. It will be really a great support for me if you are subscribing to the podcast. Also on YouTube, if you are subscribing to the YouTube channel, for those that are watching that on YouTube, and also to provide a review or some likes to be also really great for me. It takes few seconds or few minutes for you, but it will be really helpful for me. So thank you for that. Okay, let's jump in now and listen to Erik. Hello, EasyMed Nation. So here is Munir Lazouzi with a special guest who is Erik Vollebregt. And I wanted really to invite Erik to our session, our episode, our podcast, just to help us understand more about the MDR, the IVDR, all what is happening now on the background, with also something about the Brexit and about also the implant files. So I have Erik here. So hello, Erik.
Hi, Munir. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So I'm really a big fan of Erik because he has a blog so called, I think, Medical Device Legals. On this blog, you are really open. You are really discussing openly all the topics related to medical devices. So we can maybe talk about that. But first, I want you, if possible, to introduce yourself, introduce your company, and then we'll know more about you.
Okay. Well, I'm a lawyer. People often mistake me for a consultant. It's usually terribly annoying when I'm negotiating an engagement with a big company, usually big US companies, because they send me an agreement for a cupcake vendor. And then I'm like, no, sorry, I'm an external lawyer with legal privilege and controlled by the Bar Association and law and such. So I'm really not a widget supplier. But I've been lawyer in devices, I would say, for about 15 years now. I've been lawyer for about 21 years. Yeah, actually, last Friday, I celebrated my 21st holiday as a lawyer.
Holiday? Great.
And before that, I was briefly at the European Commission in the competition Directorate, which was also very interesting, but I also found out that I'm not civil servant material. So I've been working with my own law firm for slightly over 7 years now. It's a niche law firm in life sciences, so we do anything in the life science space. So we do pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, medical devices, and food. And within the firm, I'm primarily responsible for the pharmaceuticals and medical technology fields, so to speak. And we work quite internationally. I would say that I have clients from all over the place. The majority of my clients is Dutch, actually. So I work for a lot of the big. I would say I work for a really substantial part of the MedTech Europe members and COSIR members. And and also for a lot of smaller companies. And I write this blog. I've been writing the medical devices legal blog for about 8 years, something like that. And it's a really well read. I think I have about 6,000 people almost subscribing by email, and then I don't know how many just read it by RSS feed or something, but. I have a lot of good response, and it's always fun to write. And like you say, people tell me that they appreciate it for the candid views I express on it.
Yeah, it's what I say. So if you don't follow Erik on his blog, I will really encourage you to go and to read it. It's why also I invited you, because I was following you during all the journey for the MDR, IVDR, and what I read was making me laugh sometimes, because it was more like really open, really honest, really transparent. It's like seeing behind the curtain and not having some of those news that were more aseptic, saying, yeah, everything is fine, everything is okay. So it was more here, are you serious about what we are doing here? So it's really something that is really interesting, and I really like that. But I also saw the comments of people, and they were also enjoying that. So it's interesting.
Yeah, sometimes it's really like a soap. I mean, I'm a lawyer, so I can see how lawmaking works, and sometimes, yeah, you just see people really make it into a play or an opera almost. So then I think there's nothing wrong with calling that out.
No, it's great. I think it's really great, but it's not usual, if I can say. Having some people talking like that openly is really not usual. Okay, Erik. Yeah, as I want to make this environment a bit more relaxed. For people that will watch this on YouTube, you will see that Erik is wearing the consultant or lawyer style. So Erik, is it okay for you if you can remove
the consultant now?
Yeah, yeah, because I think we talked about should you wear also the black robe, if I can say, the black lawyer robe, but I think it was.
I could have worn my lawyer robe with. It's actually, I'm obliged to wear that in court, otherwise I'll be kicked out and the judge won't listen to arguments. So
Yeah, they will think that you are a consultant, so they want to not you there.
Never do that, no.
So is it okay for you if you remove your tie? That will make it a bit more like relaxed,
Formal?
and that we have people
can.
following a discussion like we are really here, between colleagues. I don't have a tie, so it's fine for me. Exactly.
Yeah, I've been secretly wearing my jeans here.
Yeah, great.
I was doing what news readers do as well. Just I don't. Yeah, I usually wear quite informal clothes in the office. Actually, I changed from my Nike hoodie into this especially for this. For this.
Okay. Okay, so I wanted to ask you some few questions just to know you more. As I said, I know you just through your blog, reading all what you are saying. I was about to meet you once, but I was not able to do that during a conference in Munich, in Germany. But I missed you because you were on the second day and I arrived at the first day only. So, but yeah, to know you more, I just wanted to ask you some few questions. So, one of the question is, what would have been the job of your dream if you were not a lawyer?
Currently, I would definitely be a science fiction writer.
Oh, really?
Yes, totally.
So, what kind of science fiction books or things you like, or maybe movies or series?
Well, I mean, my son went to Alita Battle Angel yesterday, and he was really enthusiastic about it. It's a movie I'd also like to see.
Okay.
So I really I like the old cyberpunk stuff, like Blade Runner. Philip K. Dick, for example, is one of my favorite science fiction writers. But I'm very, I like space opera. I'm a total sucker for space opera, and also all the weird alien stuff, speculation about what aliens can be. For example, the Alistair Reynolds universe. He's a really, really good British science fiction writer that sets the scene for a fantastic universe with really mysterious alien civilizations that never show up, basically, that are sort of hiding, but you know they're there.
Okay.
So that's the kind of stuff I really love, and I could totally write about myself. Actually, I would if I were not a lawyer.
I think you will be great. As I said, on your blog, you are really writing very well. So I think it will be really great. So if you do that, don't forget to tell me. I will really like to see it and to read it. Okay, the second question is, how many languages are you speaking? Because mainly I see on your blog that you are using a lot of different languages for your wording. One title was in French. I can't remember the title, but I was asking myself, is he speaking French? Because I'm French also, so I was saying, oh.
Yeah, well, it depends a bit on how you define speak. I would say I'm proficient in 6 languages, and I have passive passive capacities in about 3 to 4 more.
Okay.
So
you can tell which ones?
Yeah, sure. Dutch is my mother tongue.
Yeah.
And of course, well, then I speak English. I speak French. I lived in Brussels for a long time, and I also worked at a Belgian law firm there for some time, where I partly had to work in French also.
Okay.
I'm fluent in German. I'm fluent in Swedish, and I'm fluent in Spanish. And then I can passively understand and read Norwegian and Danish. And also my Italian is, pretty okay passively. I mean, I can chit-chat a bit in Italian, but that's about it. And I used to speak passable Czech, but that has sort of gone away. I can read Latin. And also, if Portuguese people speak slowly, then I can also sort of figure out what they're saying and do.
Really, it's really amazing. And when I'm hearing that, I say, have you learned that at school, or it was during your experience? You had to learn that because you moved, or?
No, I mean Swedish. Swedish was I've lived there. German was a girlfriend.
Okay.
Czech was a girlfriend. Let's say Italian I've picked up on holiday. Spanish just interests me as a language, so I try and develop it all the time. If you speak Italian and Spanish, and Portuguese is not that difficult. And the same with Norwegian and Danish, that if you're fluent in Swedish, then Norwegian and Danish are a small step.
It's true. I'm trying now to learn. I speak now German, but it's really difficult. But I saw a sentence saying life is too short to learn German. So I don't know if it's it's true, but it's one thing that is not really a motivating sentence to continue to be fluent on this language. But Okay, just one thing. So I wanted to do always that to a lawyer. You see that on the movie, so I want to see if it's working with you. I have a sentence for you. So can you raise your right hand? Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Oh, that depends.
So we will go now through the serious part, if I can say, and talk about all the journey for the EU MDR. And I'm sure that you will have you have good stories, if I can say, talk about that. As I said to you, so I followed you when you started to talk or to follow the discussion about the new EU MDR, IVDR, and I wanted to ask you what is your...
Just going to move out of the sun, Munir, because
No
I'm
problem.
sitting right in the sun.
No problem.
So here we go.
Great. So just wanted to ask, what is your feeling, or how was your feeling while you were following all this journey, when you were doing all your blog? So can you tell us more from the inside exactly what was your thinking?
Okay. Well, of course, I'm on the relative inside because I was never with actually with a competent authority or with the Commission or with the European Parliament when the MDR and the IVDR was made. But I mean, what I can say is that, and it's maybe it's a bit of a cynical perspective, but let's see. Here we go, because. I think if you look at the political discussion, the MDR and the IVDR were really instruments to solve a political problem. And the political problem was that we had the PIP breast implant scandal, and we had the metal-on-metal hips scandal. Now the question is, I mean, for me as a lawyer, do you need new laws to solve that problem? And if you look at it from a really technical perspective, the answer is no. What I think we needed was a lot better cooperation between competent authorities in Europe, which the Commission also started with the Joint Immediate Action Plan immediately after these scandals. And what you also need, I think, is you need a more harmonized and maybe refined approach to what clinical data do we want to see for what specific devices, because that was the problem with the metal hips. Actually, I mean, people cry, there was a big outcry over that, but in the end, I mean, the design of the hips as such was good. The only problem was that they didn't perform over time as you would like. So question is, what could we have done to prevent that from happening, right? How could we have seen at the moment that you were dealing with a device that could become potentially problematic in the future? And basically, with the instruments that were there in the law at the time, all of these things could have been addressed. If you look at PIP was a case of fraud. It was a company that deliberately hid illegal activities.
Yeah.
Now, that's something you're not going to solve with, let's say, stricter regulation.
Yeah, because people can still do that, can still make fraud. It's not like this that will avoid this.
Exactly. I mean, it's like with tax legislation. People will always try and launder money and commit tax fraud, no matter what you do with legislation. So the only thing you could actually do was have better surveillance. So how could you have had better surveillance? For example, by competent authorities, because this was also the kind of fraud that a notified body could not have spotted under the normal circumstances. If you look at what the Court of Justice said, the European Court of Justice in the case against TÜV Rheinland that was brought, the European Court said, hey, there was basically no reason for TÜV Rheinland to expect anything untoward. So there was also no reason for them to dig deeper than they did. And that's the whole thing. If you decide that you're going to outsource state authority to grant certificates and to do surveillance audits to basically commercial institutions, then you also have to accept that they don't act as police. Because the only thing a notified body can do is basically say, okay, well, I have a suspicion that something is not completely right, so I can ask for documentation. But what a competent authority with policing power can do is say, okay, I don't trust what's happening here. I suspect something is going on in this other building. And I can say, show me this other building. I want to look inside. And if the company says no, then you can say, okay, I want to go inside of this building, no matter what you think of it. And even and this problem was partly addressed by requiring notified bodies to do unannounced audits, but even unannounced audits are not going to solve the problem of a company that is dedicated to doing specific fraud. Because you still know that as long as I keep my activities out of sight of the notified body, they can do all the unannounced audits as they like. But as long as I know where they're going to do the unannounced audits, because they're not allowed to go elsewhere, then I can still have a good chance of keeping this hidden. Yeah. And that is something that I see as a lawyer, is that the way the system is set up is that basically European competent authorities are getting an enormous bang for their buck. That pharmaceuticals concentrate, these are outsourced to the market. But then you also see that means that the competent authorities are really thinly staffed for medical devices. In the Netherlands, for example, where I live, at some point, I calculated with a client that there was a difference of almost a factor 100 in resources committed to pharmaceutical products oversight and medical devices oversight at the competent authorities. So I mean, you get what you pay for. And what I can see, and I think that sort of closes the loop, is that with these scandals, basically the politicians discovered that medical devices have a role in the healthcare system that everybody sort of overlooked, and that they have a much more important role in healthcare than people were willing to invest in regulation for.
So they opened it. Does this open the eyes of regulators or governments? Does this put more highlight on the industry?
Yeah, I think so, because what you see is that in cases like this, you always you sort of go through this whole let's say a U shape, where people first start to it's a bit like this famous model of people accepting losses. Is first they have to recognize that something is wrong, and then they have to start to know what is wrong, and then at the bottom of the U they accept it, and then things can go up again. Well, and you saw this whole classic U thing happening with people in the European Parliament saying pacemakers are regulated like water kettles because they both have the CE mark. You have to do randomized clinical trials with pacemakers, which is totally nuts from a clinical perspective. Yeah. Would you like a placebo pacemaker, for example, or will it give you a placebo hip implant or something? So you saw a lot of misunderstanding as well. And but what you see is that the politicians, they came up with new laws, and the problem with politics, pardon my French, or pardon my Dutch, I should rather say, is that you do not need a diploma to be a politician. So that also means that you don't need to really understand what you're doing, and that is a problem, because you see that there's a lot of weird stuff going on with legislation, and it's not always motivated by the best, let's say, expert views on things. And in medical devices, most of the experts were in industry, but everybody distrusted industry at the moment, at that time. So it's difficult for industry to say, well, maybe it's a good idea if you go this way or that way, because they were really in the corner of shut up because you're naughty, so everything you say is unbelievable. And so that was a thing. And then we had all these member states that all had very different views on what renewed medical devices legislation should look like. You had the French that said, oh, we need a medical devices branch for the European Medicines Agency, and we would rather die than accept reprocessing of single-use devices.
Okay.
And you had the Germans that said, well, we have all these excellent notified bodies that are completely beyond reproach, that are doing a fantastic job. And by the way, we have good experiences with reprocessing of single-use devices. So what are you making such a fuss about? And that was just really, that was sort of completely diagonally opposed. And then you have all the other member states that wanted things in terms of vigilance and databases. And then you see that in the end, you come up with this MDR and IVDR that are a mix of basically what everybody wants. There were some, I would say, really defining moments in the legislative history where first the Estonian presidency, if I remember correctly, managed to shunt the whole thing to the trilogue, and then the Dutch presidency that managed to finally get agreement in the trilogue. And I think those were actually Herculean feats, more or less, because people were so incredibly divided about what the regulation should look like. Yeah.
And as you said, so we had, I think, when did it start again? It was 2012, I think, or 2013. Can't remember exactly.
2012, the MDR proposal and the IVDR proposal were made by the Commission September 2012.
Okay.
But before that time, the Commission was already working on a pretty modest midlife update of both of the directives. But when these two, very politicized scandals hit the market, they had to really scramble to do something else.
But mainly, so 2012 started. So if I remember, how long it takes for presidency? So it's 6 months or 1 year for because in the European Union it's like we are turning the presidency of the European Union. So we had started 2012, then we finalized 2017. It means nearly 5 years times 2, so 10 presidencies. Is it that? Is correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So, and I think each presidency has its own objectives, his own thing. So it was not like focused on this regulation or doing that. It was maybe an urgency at the beginning, but I suppose that at the end it was more like, not a priority first.
Yeah, some presidencies had more of a focus on this than others. And also, I mean, while this whole MDR thing was going on, we also had this enormous economic crisis with Greece in a lethal tailspin as a country. We had Portugal and Ireland that were climbing out of a recession. So, yeah, a lot of these presidencies also had bigger fish to fry politically, you could say.
Great. And this also was the reason for all this late, if I can say, or the delay for releasing this regulation, or it's a normal process? The 5 years is normal, if I can say, to have that.
Well, I would say that it's quite a long time for a European law to come into being. But on the other hand, what we shouldn't forget is these were regulations, and what the Commission really tried to do with these two regulations is to get a lot more power than it used to have under the directives. So
just can you make the I know the difference, but can you maybe explain just the difference for people that don't know exactly what's the difference between a directive and a regulation?
Of course. Yeah, because currently we have directives, and the way it works with directives is that they are basically, let's say, a sort of legislative template. So the Treaty on Functioning of EU says if there's a directive, then a member state has to do what is necessary to achieve the effects prescribed in the directive. So basically it says, okay, here is what you need to do, but you can write it up in whichever way you like in your own national law.
Okay.
So with and that has, with the medical devices directives, led to interesting situations. Sometimes where member states didn't copy definitions from the directives correctly. That's something that the Netherlands, for example, did, or they made dynamic references to the annexes of the directives. A regulation is really it's a top-down, directly effective legislative instrument. So it's basically like a European law. A directive first doesn't have its own effect vis-a-vis private parties, but a regulation does. It's like a law that comes directly from Brussels, and member states are not allowed to do anything to amend it or implement it except what is specifically specified in the regulation that they can do. So, for example, the regulation says member states can set their own rules for costs related to surveillance of. So, for example, if you want to request a single registration number, then the member state can decide their own fee for that. That follows from that.
But the text, they have to copy past the text, if I can say, to their law, if I can say. They cannot change anything.
Well, they're actually not even allowed to copy paste it because it's already in force in their language. So it's already part of their legal order.
Okay, that's great. Now we have passed, if I can say, those 5 years with all the discussion. As you mentioned, this was kind of a puzzle of requirements for many countries at the end. So do you think this is a coherent puzzle, if I can say? Do you think the text is really, because when I read the text, I have to read it 10 times, even more, to really understand it, or have to come back to it to understand again some sentences. So sometimes it was really difficult when I look to the MDD, which was for me a bit more structured, if I can say. Now you go to an article, it asks you to go to another article and to go to another annex and to go to an article again. So it's like a bit difficult. But how do you see it?
Well, I think it's pretty systematic, but it takes some time to understand how it works. What you can see also is it started out quite systematically with the Commission proposal. That was pretty logical, because basically what the Commission did was they took the directives, they took all the good stuff in the directives, then they added the goods legislation from the Blue Guide, the whole economic operator regime.
Sure.
Then they thought, shit, but everybody is completely going apeshit over these high risk devices. So we need some European level thing for that. So they started out with the scrutiny procedure, which in the end got sort of politically derailed, and then they thought, okay, but if we call it differently, then it's maybe more acceptable. So we call it the clinical evaluation consultation procedure. And if we sell it well enough by saying to everybody all the time that it's a swift procedure, even if it's totally not, then we can sell it politically. And then what else did they do? Well, of course, they try to solve a lot of other problems, like, for example, get the non-medical devices in. Yeah. They did a lot of stuff in classification. And also what you see is, I agree that the text is not always very systematical and not always completely clear, which is typically what you get if you have a Commission, a European Parliament, and 28 member states that have something to say about this. So a very good friend of mine that used to be sitting in council meetings for one of the member states where they were negotiating about this kind of stuff. She would always say, well, this is how European lawmaking works, because what we would always do if we were in a situation where we couldn't agree about a particular phrasing of the text, then we would just write it down in a way that everybody could interpret it the way they wanted, and then everybody was happy.
And this is a problem, because when we read it, then I have my interpretation, the other have their interpretation, and you go to a notified body who has his own interpretation. So then this is a difficult phase, if I can say.
Yeah, and that's also, and that with the MDR and the IVDR, that's especially problematic, because it does quite a lot of new things, and also has a complex transitional regime. And that also brings me to this the blog post you refer to. There's not a transitional period, because in the end, the MDR and the IVDR that they could agree on, those were the texts that were still quite open-ended. There was a lot of additional implementation that had to be done, a lot of guidance that needed to be developed. And I think the Commission and the member states totally, utterly, and completely underestimated how much work they still had to do to deliver a complete and functioning regulatory system.
I was telling, mainly we have this transition period that is normally for I mean, it was sold to us like it's a transition period for manufacturers, but for me, in reality, it's more transition period for notified bodies, because as of today, we have, and we'll talk maybe about that, we have only one notified body that was officially accredited for MDR. So it means that manufacturers, even if they want to put in place all what is required on the regulation, they cannot, if I can say. It's not like they don't want, they cannot.
I agree, and that's what I often what I see all the time with a lot of my clients is that they say like, we've done all we can do by now to implement this stuff, but there are so many open questions that we can't really execute on our implementation because there are so many known unknowns. Like for example, interfacing specifications for UDAMED. If you're an enormous multinational and you need to notify, and they're going to wait with UDAMED until the very last, March 2020 until you can really use it. That is like asking for trouble. If you start a transitional period by saying by having no notified bodies designated under the MDR and the IVDR, so it takes forever before people can make applications for certificates. Of course you are going to have the mother of all bottlenecks at the end. It's not rocket science.
Oh my God, it was really a great talk with Erik. So thank you, Erik, for that. We will still continue this talk next week. So don't forget to listen to it and to follow that, because next week also will be really a great talk. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Don't forget to keep learning, to share this episode and share this podcast with your colleagues who want to learn medical device regulations and standards. And I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much and have a good day.